All right, we'll say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our TAMLUD TORAH sponsor for the month of Iyar, an anonymous sponsorship with Hakaras Hatov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for all of the blessings He has bestowed upon us, and for refuah Shleima for Devorah Leah bas Chaya Rivka. May we all be zoche Hashem to witness the imminent coming of mashiach Mehira b'yameinu. Amen. Our week of learning sponsor, Shmuel Robyn Korobkin, in creation of the yahrzeit of Shmuel's father, Mr. Leonard Korobkin, Lipa ben Yechezkel HaKohen, whose yahrzeit is today. We hope that in the merit of our TAMLUD TORAH, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family in Nechama. I will say with that, we have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem, some really incredible and overwhelming Gemara today, over the next couple of days. So today's daf is Pei Daled, 84. We are Metzia Hashem picking up on Pei Gimel days. We have a lot of ground to catch up on over here. I'd like to say in the middle of the page, but it's actually a little bit higher than the middle of the page. Okay, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Ashkach Lahu, Parhagno or Parhaguno. So we'll say it's about, I'm going to have to count from the top actually. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, about 19, 20 lines down from the top. So Belazar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi, just to understand how incredible this is and just the timing of this Gemara. So remember again, this is Rabbi Lazar, who is the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, whose yahrzeit in Meretz Hashem is B'Shah Tov Matzlachas, this Matzah Shabbos and Sunday, Lag BaOmer. So, Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Ashkach Lahu Paraguna Tekatafis Ganavi. He found this Paraguna. So what's a Paraguna? Rashi says over here, Memuna Shel Melech, someone who's appointed by the king, one of the officers of the king. And what was this guy's job? This guy's job was to catch thieves. That was the idea. Rashi says, Bodega Charein Uvitovson. His job was to catch thieves. Whenever he was an officer of the king, catch thieves. Fine. He wants to Arale, Hechi Yachlas Lihu, Lav Kechayusa Masili. So Rabbi Lazar was intrigued by this guy. He said, how do you catch thieves? Sometimes these thieves, they're so cunning and conniving, like beasts of the forest. The Chsiv, Bo Sirmos Kol Chaysayar, Ikeda Ami Mahai Kra Kamarla, Yarab Mr. Ka'arye Bisucho. Okay, so he quoted the pasuk to this guy, whichever the pasuk is. But the point over here is that the thieves are often cunning like the animals of the forest. Like the animals of the forest know how to disguise themselves, know how to hide. So he asked this officer, how are you able to catch the thieves? And he was said the following, Dilma Shaklis Tzadiki Vishafkis Rishi. Now, what Rabbi also was really intrigued by was this idea is, how do you know that the people you're really catching are really criminals? In other words, maybe you're going ahead and you're catching tzaddikim and freeing the criminals. In other words, how do you know that what you're doing is truly just? So this is Amalei, Umaya Avid, Hamina de Malkahu. So the officer essentially said, you know what could I do? I'm appointed by the king. So essentially what the officer was saying is, you're right. Right, it is possible that maybe I'm catching the wrong people. In other words, maybe I'm catching the tzaddikim and leaving the risham, or maybe I'm catching the risham. In other words, there is a certain suffix. At times, I'm in doubt as to whether or not I'm actually catching the right people. Amar ta agmarcha hechi seheri tavid. So the Rabbi said, you know what? Come to me. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna give you a strategy to be able to catch thieves, to identify who's a thief and who's not a thief. All right. What's the strategy? Go into the chanus. Now, chanus literally means a store, right? But really in this context, really means like an inn, a place where people would sometimes go to eat. So go into the inn, go into the store at 4 hours of the day. All right, now watch this. If you walk in, now this is 4 hours into the day. If you walk in at 4 hours into the day and you see a guy holding a cup of wine and dozing, so this is kind of a little bit early in the day, only 4 hours into the day, holding a cup of wine and dozing. So the Gemara says, Sha'al Iluya. So inquire after such an individual. Itzor merabananu v'nayim aktume kadam l'girsei. So if it turns out that he's a Talmud Chacham, so again, and you see him dozing, that's okay. He probably got up early that morning to learn. So he got up early that morning to learn. This is like his meal of the day, first meal of the day. So he's tired. It's interesting. Gemara doesn't attribute the fatigue to the wine that he's drinking 4 hours into the day. Right? They make him differently today. So it's interesting. So he attributes the dozing to the fact that he got up very early in the morning. If you ask after this person, and it turns out that he was a worker, so it's a laborer, so it's possible that he got busy earlier in the morning. So in other words, the Gemara is saying, Rabbi Elazar is saying, find out why the guy is so tired. So if he's a Talmud Chacham, it's because he got an earlier start in the morning. If he's a laborer, it's because he got an earlier start in his day. Via vidite balayla redude radit. Or maybe he's a worker and he worked the whole night. You'll say, but if somebody was working in their home the whole night, you would have heard the noise. So literally again, redude radit, Rashi says is, maybe he makes like metal wire. So apparently the malacha of making metal wire could be done without too much noise. Okay, that was it. Now if at the end of the day, none of these possibilities are feasible, V'ilo ganvahu, he's a thief. In other words, if he's not a Talmud Chacham who got up early in the morning to learn, and if he's not a laborer who got up early in the morning, and if he didn't work throughout the night, there's only one other reason why someone would be tired at 4 hours into the day, dozing at 4, and that's why? Because he's a thief. And obviously, again, he was working, right? He was working in his thievery the entire night. And Rabbi Elazar says, that's how you could tell who the thief is, that's the guy who you go arrest. Okay, V'lo ganavu v'tafsei. Ishtama milsa b'malka. So apparently, this paraguna, this officer, told over other people in the king's court about this strategy of Rabbi Elazar. Amar, the Gemara says, Amar kraina de'igarta ihu lehevi parumka. So it is an expression that literally, again, he who reads the letter should be the one who delivers it. So in other words, they said to Rabbi Elazar, you are the one who devised this strategy. We're hiring you on behalf of the king to go ahead and arrest thieves in the kingdom. So the Gemara says, Asiyah Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, v'katafas ganavi. So sure enough, they hired Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. So let's remember again, it's Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Yochai. I also want to point out, this is Rabbi Elazar who was in the cave, right? Was in the cave with his father. So again, so they go ahead and they hire Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and B'tafsi Gavi. And again, his job was to catch thieves. Okay? Shalach Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, Chometz ben Yayin. So what's Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha sends a message to Rabbi Shimon. And he says to him, to Rabbi Elazar, he says, you are like vinegar, the son of wine. Now both say this was an insult. So remember again, vinegar, just like vinegar compared to wine, is obviously again an inferior product. So over here he was saying, you, Rabbi Elazar, you are the son of wine. Right? Your father, Rishon Bar Yochai, was wine, and you are like vinegar. Admase atamoser amoshel elokenu lahariga. Now remember again, we'll say, what kind of thieves was Rabbi Elazar catching? I'm sure he was catching all kinds of thieves, but amongst them were Jewish thieves. So how can you go ahead and participate in such a practice like this, to hand over Jews to the monarchy? Shalach lei kotzim ani mechalim in akerem. Rabbi Elazar says, I am simply going ahead and removing thorns from the vineyard. What he was saying was, they're criminals. And ultimately, again, they need to be dealt with. So I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm simply removing the thorns from the vineyard. What says incredible? Shalach lei yavo bal akerem v'yichles kotzav. So Rabbi Shimon ben Karcha sends back, let the owner of the vineyard take care of the thorns. Right? You don't have to take care of the thorns. Rabbi Shimon say such an incredible yesod also, that sometimes, there is this fine line in life where sometimes wrong things happen, and it's important to get involved and to take a stand, and it's important to go ahead and weed out the thorns. And then there are other times in life where you just have to leave it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to right the ship. You have to leave it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take out the thorns. So apparently in this particular context, they were saying, okay, Rabbi Elazar, we're not disagreeing that the people who you are arresting or that you're handing over for arrest are bad guys. They are thorns in the vineyard. But who says it's your job to remove the thorns? Sometimes you have to leave that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, especially when it comes to your fellow Jew. Yom Achad, Paga be'ahu koves. One day, so Rabbi Elazar is doing his job. One day he runs into a koves. Koves is a launderer. Literally again, right? Just a guy who launders clothing for a living. Karye chometz ben yayin. So this guy called Rabbi Elazar, you are vinegar, the son of wine. So he insulted him. It's a pretty significant insult. Amar, medichatzef kulehai, shma mina reshiyahu. Someone who has such chutzpah must be a rasha. Must be a rasha. Amar lahu, tafsuhu. He ordered that this man be arrested. Be arrested, so tafsu, they arrested him. So now after kind of tempers cooled a little bit, I will say, and I remember again, this is the same Rabbi Elazar when he came out of the cave, everywhere he looked was destroyed. So Rabbi Elazar was a passionate man, was an intense individual. So after things calmed down a little bit, he's like, all right, maybe I shouldn't have had this guy. He insulted me, but at the end of the day, maybe I should not have had him arrested. V'lo matzi. So ultimately, again, but he couldn't find the guy. He couldn't track down the guy after he was arrested. Kari alei shomer piv ulushono shomer mitzaros nafsho. So what happens? The Gemara says, so he said, literally, one who goes ahead and watches his mouth, one who watches what he says, saves himself from terrible misfortune. In other words, he said about this guy, had he not insulted me, this misfortune would not have befallen him. So what happens? The Gemara says, zakfu. Sure enough, they hanged the guy. They hanged him, right? So the Gemara says, come to say Zekifa v'kabachi. So we'll say at this point in time, Rabbi Elazar obviously feels terrible, because Rabbi Elazar, again, remember, all the guy did, what was his crime? His crime was that he insulted Rabbi Elazar. Now, that's not a capital crime. It's not good. And again, remember again, Rabbi Elazar, the proof that he, so to speak, what was Rabbi Elazar's taina? The fact that you have such chutzpah indicates that you're a rasha. So now, it turns out the guy was hanged. So Rabbi Elazar stands under the body, kum tusei zekifa v'kabachi. Rabbi Elazar stands underneath the body and he's crying. He's crying because now he feels that he has had an potentially innocent man executed. Amru Rabbi. So the people came over to him and said, Rabbi Elazar, al yira be'einecha. Do not be upset that this guy was executed. Shehu ubeno ba'olu na'ara murasa b'yom kippurim. Wow. This guy, he and his son had an illicit act of relations with a betrothed girl on Yom Kippur. So there's obviously like multiple layers to that particular transgression. So the point over here is they said to Rabbi Elazar, the guy was a rasha. So he niach yado al b'nei me'av. He put his hand literally again on his stomach, like on his kishkas. Amar sisu b'nei me'av sisu. Rejoice my kishkas, right? Rejoice my innards. Masfekos shalachem kach, vadois shalachem alachas kama v'kama. So essentially what he was saying was, his intuition was correct about this guy. And if my intuition is correct, that's what he calls a suffix. If my intuition is correct, then all the more so my definitive judgments are correct as well. Muftach ani bachem, shein rima v'tolah sholet es bachem. I know that also even after I die, there'll be no decomposition of my body. In other words, that my kishkas, even my intuition is correct. Allah has come. No decomposition will befall me. I will say, I'll just find something amazing. A lot of incredible things we'll pick up along this journey of Gemara. I will say, but it is very striking how when you see chutzpah, so chutzpah is indicative of rishos. Chutzpah is indicative of just a person of very low moral quality and low moral caliber. And I will say, it makes sense. The defining quality of a Jew is tznius, is modesty. I'm not talking about dress. I'm talking about modesty in character. And when you see a person who is a mechutzav, a person who is just arrogant, who is brash, who just doesn't conduct himself in an appropriate way, that is absolutely indicative of moral decay. Now, this is an extreme case of moral decay, but it is important to understand, and that's why, again, in Yiddishkeit, you do see such an incredible emphasis on conducting oneself in a more modest fashion. Really incredible Gemara. So what happens? So the Gemara says, and I both say, even though it turns out that Rabbi Elazar was justified, right, in the arrest of this guy, and it was turned, even though he did not execute this guy, but ultimately, again, he orchestrated the events that led to his execution, and it turned out that the guy was really a culpable individual. Rabbi Elazar still felt very unsettled about how everything occurred. He just felt very unsettled. So the Gemara says, what happened? So we'll say, so he's looking to figure out, like, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu think about what I did? In other words, in the eyes of God, did I do something right or did I do something wrong? So this is interesting, Gemara. Ashkiyu sama deshinta. So they gave him like an anesthetic. Va'ilu ala beise deshisha, and brought him into a house of marble. Now we'll say, this is talking about over here where often they would do surgery in like in Talmudic times, the sterile environment was a marble home, because apparently we saw this in Gemara Sechus Brachos. Apparently, in a marble home, the winds don't have as much of an effect, and so it was considered to be more sterile environment. So they go ahead and they do surgery. What do they do with him? The Gemara says, Vishisha v'karu l'krise. They essentially what they did is, we're going to Rabbi Lezer was very obese. They did liposuction. So what they did is they opened up his stomach. The kamafki mine dikule detarba. And apparently, again, they extracted buckets and buckets of fat. Umose b'shem shabbatamus, right? Vav, and they left it in the sun in the months of Tammuz and Av, which is the summer. V'lo masrichi, and they didn't decompose. So the Gemara says, I called tarba nami lo sriach. But generally, again, I guess fat taken from a person doesn't decompose. To which the Gemara says, "Kol tarba lo sriach shuraiki sumki masriach." So in general, again, I will say the idea over here is, so generally fat doesn't decompose, but generally when you extract fat from a person, there's like some fleshy membranes that are there that does decompose. Hacha av agav diika shuraiki sumki lo masri. Rabbi Elazar, nothing decomposed. Kari anafshe af bisari yishkon lavetach. So Rabbi say this was the litmus test for him. Another interesting litmus test. Right? So he said, af bisari yishkon lavetach, according to the pasuk, even my flesh will endure forever. The idea is that nothing about him decomposed. I will say now, why was this a test? This goes back to before. He went on a hunch, right? He had an intuition. So intuition, so to speak, is associated with your kishkas, right? With your inside. You feel something on your inside. So how does he know if his intuitions are correct? Now again, it turned out that what he did was correct, but he was asking more like in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he devised this test. Will my insides, so to speak, decompose? If they'll decompose, that's indicative that perhaps again HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not happy with my intuition. If at the end of the day it didn't decompose, which it didn't, after bisari yishkon lavetach, even my flesh will remain forever. He felt that was indicative of a sign from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Ribono Shel Olam blessed his intuition as well. All right, incredible. V'af Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, Mata, top of Pei Daled, Mata ki haimaisa liyadeh. So this is actually very interesting. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi was also appointed by the king. 84a Pei Daled Amud Aleph. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi apparently was also appointed by the king to be an officer to go ahead and arrest thieves. Paga be'elio. So we'll say it's incredible. So who so to speak bumps into Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi? Elio Hanavi. Amarle admase atomoser amosha Elokeinu lahariga. What are you doing, handing over Jews to be executed? In other words, we'll say Elio is not saying that the Jews were innocent, right? He's not saying you're handing over innocent people. He's like, but why are you doing this to Jews? I want to say that again. Let someone else deal with the guilt or innocence of Jews. Why are you handing over the criminals? I will say, I just want to be clear. It's important to give a very important qualification over here. Remember, if somebody represents a threat to the community, then of course, again, one has to go ahead and deal with the authorities, and one has to be able to go ahead and address someone who's a threat to the community. It must have been these guys who they're talking about over here were like petty criminals who were doing whatever they were doing in greater society. So again, they definitely deserve judgment. But Elio says to Rabbi Shmuel, why are you getting involved in this? Why are you getting involved in this? Amrle, Ma'i Avid, Hamra Demalkahu. So again, I will say, Rabbi Shmuel said again, what do you want from me? I'm an officer of the king. The king appointed me. So the Gemara says, Amrle, Avucha Arik La'asya, At Arik La'lutkiya. So he said, your father, when he got into some trouble with the government, he ran away to Asya. So you should run away to Lutkiya. So Elio was telling Rabbi Shmuel, extricate yourself from the circumstance. Extricate yourself from the situation. Run away. I understand you can't change anything, so move. Leave. I will say a tremendous Moshe Haskell. There are times in life when we are in problematic situations, and my avoda is to go ahead and navigate them and fix them. And then there are other times where the circumstance is so broken that sometimes my avoda is to remove myself from the circumstance. Sometimes the best eitzah is extrication. This could be true in certain toxic relationships. This could be true in certain negative situations. Sometimes you navigate and sometimes you extricate. So the Gemara goes weiter. So we'll say, okay, now we've got an interesting story over here. So Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, when they would be next to each other, right? Hava ayul bakra de turi beinayu, v'lo hava nagabu. So we'll say, so apparently, Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. So we'll say, remember again, these are the two personalities we just discussed. They were both just appointed the officers of the king to catch thieves. So apparently, they were incredibly obese. So obese that when they stood stomach to stomach, a team of oxen could pass underneath them, underneath their stomachs, right? And when I touched them, obviously this is hyperbolic, right? But the point is, it's talking about that they weren't just a little bit overweight, they were incredibly obese. Okay? All right, this is an interesting exchange over here. So a certain noblewoman came over to them and said to them, clearly your children are not your own. In other words, what she was saying is, you are too obese to possibly be intimate with your wives, and therefore, again, the fact that you have children, those children must have come from other men. Amr lahen, so it's interesting, they responded, Shalahen gadol mishalanu. Now, what they responded was like this. Now, what they responded was like this. Rashi says, Shalahen gadol mishalanu, kresim shal nishosenu, gadol mishalanu. Now, they gave an interesting answer and never, ever go down this road. Right? They said, you think we're fat, you should see our wives. You should see our wives. Right? So I say, now by the way, Gemara doesn't say they also did not go home that night. Right? So I say, they say, you think we're fat, you should see our wives. So the Gemara says, Ika da'amri. So first of all, it's strange that that's an answer. What exactly does that mean? So the Gemara says, Ika da'amri, hachi amrulei, ki ish gevuraso. Okay, so I'll say, so now what they was, otherwise what they were saying was like this. What they were saying, also very interesting exchange, which we'll discuss in just a moment. So we'll say, we'll come back and reframe that answer in just a moment. The second answer, first answer they gave is, you think we're fat, you should see our wives. Okay, we'll see exactly how that answers the question. Second answer they gave is, ki ish gevuraso. That literally, again, as large as a person is, as obese as a person is, so again, his male member is large enough to be able to go ahead and consummate an act of relations. All right. Again, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Ika da'amri, haki amrulei, ava dochakes es habasar. So we'll say the other answer, the third possibility is what they said, is that love pushes away the flesh. Now, what does that mean? Rashi says over ava dochakes es habasar, umitoch she'ta'avos meruba al ta'avosenu basar shnei nitchaku. That essentially, where there's a will, there's a way. Or lemaisa, again, where there is desire, there's a way. So in other words, these rabbanim say, yes, we're obese, and quite possibly our wives are obese, but there's desire, and where there is desire, there is a way. Where there is desire, there is a way. Okay. So the Gemara says, okay, so that's the end of the exchange. Right? So the Matronisa says to Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shmuel, you're too fat, there's no way your kids are yours, and they give three answers. Either number one, our wives are fatter, which again doesn't need to be an answer. Number two, our aver, our male member, our mila is large enough that we're fine. Or number three, ava dochakes es habasar. Right? Desire pushes away the flesh. I'll say, by the way, you should just know there is a beautiful Magid of Mezrish. The Magid of Mezrish says on that phrase, ava dochakes es habasar. Because there's got to be something to that phrase. He says like this, he says, Avas Hashem, when a person is in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, dochekes es habasar, it pushes away the desire for material, earthly things. That you see, normally we're so drawn after desires of the flesh, right? We're so drawn after the basar. We're so drawn to satisfy the physical. Where there is ava, where there is love of the Ribono Shel Olam, and intense love, dochekes es habasar. that keeps the desires of the flesh at bay. Incredible. Time Sector is worth it for that one little line. So the Gemara says, I would say you should make that into a bumper sticker, but I think it would look weird. So the Gemara says as follows. Now, why are they engaging her? Like, why are they engaging her altogether? Like, in other words, why even enter into this? Can you imagine this? You're walking down the street, they're walking down the street, and this matronisa, this noblewoman says to them, your children aren't yours, your wives committed adultery. Why even engage? So the Gemara says, both said there's a concept that literally do not talk with a fool. In other words, don't get drawn into a conversation with a fool. As well as just because someone says something doesn't mean you have to respond. So why respond here? So Gemara says, no, shelo hotzi laz al b'neihem. Because Shabbos say she's making a serious statement, and what she's doing is she's casting aspersions on the lineage of their children. So this is not, if it was a personal attack, okay, you could just kind of let that go. But this is not just a personal attack. Ultimately, again, this is attack potentially on the identity of their kids. As such, they felt they had to go ahead and respond. Shabbos say, okay, now a very interesting Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan, a varid Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi, kichamos baz teisha kabin. So literally again, the Makom Mila, the male member of Rabbi Yochanan, of Rabbi Shmuel, was the size of literally kechamas. Chamas is like a jug or a canteen, right? A jug, bas teisha kabin, that held 9 kabin. Amra Papa, a varid Rabbi Yochanan, kechamas bas chamisha kabin. Varmili bas shloshas kabin. Rav Papa gufei ki dekuri dahar panoi. Okay, so I'm also saying, they definitely skipped this in yeshiva, but I'm saying, right. But Lamaisa, so we'll say, so this is an interesting Gemara, right? They're coming along over here and telling us how large the Mila, the Makom Mila of these respective Rabbanim was. So we'll say, what is this, right? What is this doing here? So Tosas points out over here. Look at Tosas in just a moment. Tap Tosas. Elu dvar nechtevu shlo lahotzi laz al bnei adam shahayu kach. So apparently, the common denominator amongst all these rabbanim is they were obese, and apparently very obese. So one would have thought when someone was so obese, it's impossible that they could have consummated an act of relations. So the Gemara comes along and tells us the size of their milah in order to go ahead and indicate they were fine. So obviously I will say, and again, using that context, it's probably a bit hyperbolic, right? Because again, measurements like that are a bit exact and a bit hyperbolic. So the Gemara says, that's what Tosafos says. It's coming along to tell us that halacha l'maisa, again, they were just fine in being able to consummate an act of relations, and it's brought up because, again, apparently, could be that for each of these individuals, so somebody was casting aspersions on the paternity of their children. So I will say, in order to solidify their yichus, that's how the Gemara says it. So I will say, thinking about this a little bit, that sometimes the Gemara talks about the size of a person's milah, of the male member, not necessarily to discuss the actual dimensions, anatomical dimensions, but rather sometimes when the Gemara talks about someone being, having a large makom milah, so it's a reference to the fact that they have overwhelming desires for physicality. Right? For example, the Gemara does this by Shimshon. We had this in Maseches Sota. The Gemara talks about, again, how well endowed Shimshon was. And again, you look at these Gemaras and it's like, what? First, how does anyone know that? That's number one. And second of all, what is that? So sometimes it's a metaphor for someone who just has overwhelming desire for physicality and specifically sexuality. So perhaps what the Gemara is also highlighting over here is everybody has different desires. There's no person in this world who's not drawn to desires for something. So some people are drawn for overwhelming desires for money, and some people are drawn for overwhelming desires for sexuality. Lest you think that because you have overwhelming desires, that precludes you from actualizing your inner greatness, or that precludes you from becoming a tzaddik. How could I be a tzaddik? How could I become Talmid Chacham when I'm drawn to such base things, and I'm drawn to them constantly and perpetually? So perhaps what the Gemara is highlighting over here is there have been great men throughout the history of our people who have been drawn sometimes to even the most carnal and basic and lustful things, and yet despite all of that, have reined it in. Despite all of that, have found a way to keep it under control. Not to conquer it. We'll say, it's kind of like lahavdil. It's like lahavdil in the world of addictions. One of the most incredible things about addictions, right? If you ever go to like a support group, it's fascinating. No one is ever healed, right? It's not like anyone comes along and says, I have overcome and totally gone ahead and I've overcome and conquered my addiction, right? I've been sober for 42 days. I've been sober for 42 years. It's an incredible thing. There are certain things that you're not going to conquer, but you're going to subdue. Perhaps that's what's happening over here. You might think with such a desire for sexual activity, with such a desire for constant carnal satisfaction, that there is no way you could become great. It's not true. Sometimes you can't obliterate certain wants and desires, but you absolutely could rein them in. You absolutely could keep them under control, and by doing that, actualize your personal greatness. Perhaps that's what's happening over here. Perhaps these particular Rabbanim had these incredible, maybe even insatiable desires, but yet at the end of the day found a way to keep it in check, and because of that, we're able to actualize their personal greatness. We all struggle with something, and we think that those struggles prevent us from ever becoming something excellent. It's not true. Just got to figure out how to rein it in. What is the thing you struggle with? What is the thing that you constantly want? What is the thing you constantly desire? That's your nisayon in life. But you could find a strategy, you could devise a strategy to keep that desire in check and move forward and actualize your greatness. Incredible. Rabbi Yochanan. Ana ishtai mishaper Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yochanan said, I am one of the last remaining members of the beautiful people of Yerushalayim. This is actually a really beautiful Gemara. A really beautiful Gemara that apparently Rashi says over here, Shapure or Shufre Zihihure To'arov Vikirun Panav. So apparently there are people of Yerushalayim who were exceedingly beautiful, and they were known as Shapire Yerushalayim. I will say it makes sense that the most beautiful city in the world produces the most beautiful people in this world. So Rabbi Yochanan says, I am from the last ones of the beautiful people of Yerushalayim. So the Gemara says, Hai man de boy, merse shofet Rabbi Yochanan. If you want to get an idea of the beauty of Rabbi Yochanan, do the following. Naise kasa de kasa me silky. Go ahead and take a silver utensil that's right from the smith, right from the silver smith. So Rashi points out there, when it comes right from the silver smith, it's still glowing, it's still red. V'namle partside durumana sumki, and fill it with pomegranate seeds from a deep red pomegranate. V'nehadir like kalile devarda sumka lepume, and put literally like a rim of rose petals around it. V'nosve ben shimshalatula, and then place this bowl with the pomegranate seeds and the rose petals in an area right between the shade and the sun. And I will say the radiance of that, which if you think about it, it's so beautiful. It's the redness of the silver bowl, right? With the redness of the pomegranate seeds, with the redness of the rose petals, all of that beautiful radiance, that'll give you like a glimpse into the beauty and radiance of Rabbi Yochanan. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Hahu zahure me'in shufrei Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says, Ini, is that true? V'hamar shufrei Rav Kahana me'in shufrei Rabbi Yavo. The beauty of Rav Kahana was like a semblance of the beauty of Rabbi Yavo. Shufrei Rabbi Yavo kain shufrei Yaakov. The beauty of Rabbi Yavo was like a semblance of the beauty of Rabbi Yavo was like a semblance of the beauty of Yaakov Avinu. Shufrei Yaakov Avinu me'in shufrei Adam Arishon. And the beauty of Yaakov Avinu, the radiance of Yaakov Avinu, was like a semblance, a little piece of the beauty of Adam Arishon. V'ilu Rabbi Yochanan lo kachashiv. Yet I will say, in this list of beautiful people, Rabbi Yochanan is not included, right? Rabbi Yochanan did not make it to the list of the Talmud's list of most beautiful people, right? So we'll say, so again, every idea starts with us, by the way. I just want to tell you, right? Every idea comes from us. So the Gemara says, so how you're extolling the beauty of Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan is not included in this list. Shiny Rabbi Yochanan, the hadras panim lo havile. I will say, isn't this, as beautiful as Rabbi Yochanan was, he was missing the crown feature of beauty, which was a beard. he didn't have a beard. That for a Jew, a beard is considered to be, again, the kind of the finishing touch to his personal beauty. So again, he had all of this beauty, but Lamais, again, he did not have a beard. Okay, therefore he's not included in the list. Rabbi Yochanan Hakaras Hatov Yosef Ashari D'Tzila. So it's an incredible Gemara. So now that the Gemara spoke about, again, the idea, the beauty of Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara tells a story. Rabbi Yochanan would sit by the entranceway of the mikvah, of the women's mikvah. Amar kisalkun benos yisrael mitzvila. So the Gemara says mitzvilas mitzvah lepago bi. So he wanted it that when the women were going home from the mikvah, and obviously again from the mikvah, there is a mitzvah to be intimate, that they should see him. That they should see him. Ki hechi dilahavu bani shapiri kavasi gemiri oraisa kavasi. So I will say, so that they should have children who are as handsome as I am, and children who are as great Talmidei Chacham as I am. I will say, this is part of a much bigger discussion, that the kavanas and the thoughts that a couple have when they are intimate absolutely have an impact on the offspring. So therefore, again, he felt that if a woman goes home and is intimate with her husband and she desires to have a child who is handsome, right, and a child who is a Talmid Chacham, that could have a positive impact on the offspring. So the Gemara says, Amar li Rabbanan, lo mistifi mar me'ene bisha. So the rabbi said to Rabbi Yochanan, aren't you afraid of an ayin hara? In other words, that like Rabbi Yochanan is sitting there kind of saying, I'm pretty much the most handsome guy and the biggest Talmid Chacham. Everybody should have kids like me. Right? Aren't you like a little bit afraid of an ayin hara? And I was going to remember again, what's ayin hara? Ayin hara, we saw this many times. Ayin hara means that when you use your brachos in a way that could potentially make someone else feel bad, HaKadosh Baruch Hu essentially says, I didn't give you these brachos to make someone else feel bad. I take them back. So here you are, kind of in a very public way, sitting by the mikveh, and again, highlighting the fact that you're handsome, that you're a Talmid Chacham, which all those things are true. But aren't you afraid maybe of some ayin hara? So this is incredible. Amar lei, ana mizar di Yosef kasina telo shalta be'ena bisha. I'm not worried about ayin hara. I'll tell you why. I hail from Yosef. I'm a descendant from Yosef HaTzadik, and for Yosef, the ayin hara has no power. How do you know that ayin hara has no power by Yosef? Tichsiv ben poras Yosef. Ben poras ali ayin. So literally again, right, this pleasing son is Yosef. A pleasing son to the eye is Yosef. So Amr Rabbi Avo, al tikri ali ayin ella ole ayin. Rather read it as Ben poras Yosef, Ben poras ole ayin. Yosef is a son who transcends the eye. The ayin hara has no power over Yosef. Yosef, he learns it from here. V'yidgu larov b'keref haaretz. So we'll say this is actually the bracha that Yaakov Avinu gives to Yosef's sons, right, to Ephraim and Menashe, that literally, again, you should proliferate. B'keref haaretz. You should now, again, literally, you should proliferate like fish in the midst of the land. That's why. So just like fish are not subject to the ayin hara. Why not? Because the water covers them. And so to the offspring of Yosef, the ayin hara has no power over them. They both say, it's just important to understand why. So this is beautiful, but why does the ayin hara have no power over Yosef? So we'll say perhaps the yesod is like this. What was Yosef's defining quality? Yosef's defining quality was having an ayin tov. Yosef had a good eye. Yosef suffered terrible misfortune, terrible adversity, terrible setback. His brothers mistreated him in a terrible way. Yet, when given the opportunity to take revenge, he doesn't. Rather, what does he say to his brothers? Lo atem shalachtem osihina. It's not you who did this. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yosef was able to reframe the difficulties of his circumstances in a positive way. And he was able to understand that everything that happens in life comes from the Ribono Shel Olam. It's not that the brothers weren't responsible for their actions. They absolutely were. But he looked at them as simple messengers in the execution of a divine plan. And because of that, he was able to love them even after they mistreated him. He was able to take care of them even after they did not take care of him. The gadlus of Yosef was an ability to look at others and the ability to look at situations with an ayin tov, with a good eye. When you live your life with an ayin tova, with a good eye, towards others and towards the circumstances of life, the ayin hara has absolutely no power over you. And I will say, what a tremendous Musar Haskell. Live life with an ayin tova. Look at other people, even when they mistreat you. Even when they mistreat you, look at them. Again, I must remember again, when people do stuff to me, it's very important to understand, while it's the person who carried out the action, it's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nothing happens to me in this world if HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want it to happen. The people who go out and perpetrate that negativity, they're just the messengers. I'm not freeing them from liability, but they're just the messengers. Everything in life comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And every situation in life comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if I can condition myself to see other people and to see circumstances with a good eye, with an ayin tova, what's the reward for having an ayin tova? The ayin hara has absolutely no control over you. Incredible. The Gemara goes weiter. Yom Echad. Hosei, get ready for this. Incredible Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Yom Echad. Havakasech Rabbi Yochanan b'Yardena. I will say one day, Rabbi Yochanan was bathing in the Yarden, in the Jordan River. Chazia Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish came along, he saw him. And I will say, Rashi points out, Reish Lakish was a robber. Not only a robber, but he was like the Rebbe of the robbers, right? He was the chief robber. So Chazi Reish Lakish v'shavar liyardin abasrei. Rabbi Yochanan ran into the Jordan River, following Rabbi Yochanan. He ran in afterwards. Amar lei chilach la'araisa. So he said to him. So Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, you know what? That strength you saw such vitality in Reish Lakish. You should use your vitality for Torah. Amar lei shufrach l'noshim. Reish Lakish says, Rabbi Yochanan, you are so, remember again, I will say, this is the same progression. Rabbi Yochanan, who sat outside of the mikvah. Rabbi Yochanan, you're too beautiful for men. Your beauty like that should be reserved for women. So Rabbi Yochanan said, Amar lei ihadros b'cha, yavin, or we'll say first wide line, yavin l'cha achosi, tishapira minai. So Rabbi Yochanan said, you think I'm beautiful, you should see my sister. And if you agree to be a Baal Tshuva, if you agree to go ahead and come back to Torah, ultimately, again, I will give you my sister in marriage. Kabbalah. So I will say, so by the way, I just want to point out to her something interesting. Tosus, if you look at Tosus, Ihadris B'cha, Tosus says, Mikan Amar Rabbeinu Tam, Reish Lakish mitchila yoda harbe, ela sheparak al Torah v'nasa ama aretz v'asak b'listios midkamari hadros b'cha mashma lios ki betchila v'lo sifrak al Torah me'alecha. Shabbos says, so this is really incredible. Tosus understands over here, Reish Lakish was once upon a time a Talmud Chacham. Then what happens? He left the fold. Now I will say, now what happens with learning is, if you're not constantly reinforcing it, you lose it. So you will say, it's not like with learning it. If a person were to say, you know what, I'm going to stop learning today, chas v'shalom. It's not the pshat that you retain everything you had beforehand. Rather, the way it works is once you leave Torah, Torah leaves you. And anything that you have acquired up until this point leaves you. Reish Lakish used to be a Talmud Chacham. Something happened in his life. He left the fold and he became a complete Amma Aretz. That's why Rabbi Yochanan uses the Lashon. He uses the Lashon, hadarta b'cha. If you come back, Rabbi Yochanan was saying, you had such potential. You were so great earlier on in life. If you come back, there is no telling what you can accomplish. So the Gemara says, so what happened? The Gemara says, good. So, good. Kabbalah, so Reish Lakish went ahead and accepted upon himself to come back to Torah. So the Gemara, listen to this. So the Gemara says, so so now what happens? They're coming out of the Jordan River, and Reish Lakish is trying to get back dressed. And I will say, he felt so weak that he was unable to get back dressed. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. So, skip. So I'll say, so why not? So remember, it's important to understand that Torah weakens us. Right? Torah is interesting. That on one hand, Torah gives you incredible strength, but on the other hand, learning of Torah is an all-immersive experience that could sap a person of some of their physical vigor. So here he came to Rabbi Reish Lakish, who when he took off his clothes and jumped into the Jordan River was full of vigor. Now in the river itself, where he agreed to take upon himself the yoke of Torah, that weakened him. So the Gemara says, Hadr akre va'asniye v'shavei gaver rabba. So I will say, so incredible enough. So Reish Lakish learned, took upon himself the yoke of Torah and became a great man. Yom Echad, Hava miflagi be midrash. So we'll say one day. So again, I will say, so to point out over here, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish have an interesting relationship. Because on one hand, it's Rebbe Talmud, but they're also brothers-in-law. Right? Remember again, because Reish Lakish ends up marrying Rabbi Yochanan's sister. Rabbi Yochanan becomes his Rebbe, and Rabbi Yochanan is also his brother-in-law. So one day they're having the following machlokes in the base medrash. Hasayif v'asakin v'apigyon v'aromach u'magal yada magal kazer me'emesa mekablim tuma mishas kimar malachtan. So we'll say if you have a sword or a knife or a spear, or an axe, or a sickle, all these different types of items that could potentially be used as weaponry. At what point in time do they become, when are they makabel tumah? And the answer is, when they are finished being made. So once they're finished being made, then they're makabel tumah. Rabbi say, when are they considered to be finished being made? Rabbi Yochanan says, when they're put in the furnace. Right, so the moment you take the metal, you put it in the furnace, it's considered to be a finished item. Reish Lakish Amar, Rabbi say, the way it works is after you take it out of the furnace, you put it in cold water, right? And that putting in cold water, that like forges it, that's when it's finished. Amar Le, Lista, Belistuse Yada. Rabbi Yochanan says, you know what? A robber knows his stuff, right? A robber knows when a weapon is done. So I will say, so Rabbi Yochanan made a statement. Now, again, it doesn't appear that Rabbi Yochanan meant this to be disparaging. What he meant this is the way he meant this was, okay, Reish Lakish, you know what? You're right. You have a different life. You have a different background than I do. So at the end of the day, you know what you know. You know what you know. So we'll say, so Amarle, so Reish Lakish, but Reish Lakish took incredible offense to it. Amarle, Umaya Hanasli. So what good has this whole life of Torah done for me? I changed my entire lifestyle. Right? What good has that done? Hasam Rebbe Karoli, Hacha Rebbe Karoli. The truth is, when I was a robber, they called me Rebbe. Right? I was the Rebbe of the robbers. And now I'm a Rebbe in the base medrash. So what have I really done in my life? In other words, if all people look at me as still like a robber, then what good has all of my change done? I will say, Amarli, Ahani Lacha, Dakrivcha Tachas Kanfi Ashchina. Now I will say, now here's what's interesting. Rabbi Yochanan was offended at what Reish Lakish said. What has it done for you? Do you really even dare to espouse such a statement like that? What has it done for you? Because you feel that maybe your ego was a little bit bruised, so now you wonder out loud in front of the base medrash, what has this lifestyle change done for you? What has it done for you? Before you're going to Gehenna. Now you're close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How can you even articulate such a thing like that? So we'll say, Rabbi Yochanan was actually shocked that Reish Lakish would even utter words like this. Chalash daitei Rabbi Yochanan. Now Rabbi Yochanan was offended, right? He was upset that how could it be that his prized Talmud didn't understand the benefit of this tremendous lifestyle change. As a result, Chalash Reish Lakish became ill. Now what ends up happening is Reish Lakish becoming ill was representative, ultimately, it was a punishment from having offended his Rebbe, Rabbi Yochanan. Okay. So asay is achsei kabachya. So we'll say, so now remember again, so now Reish Lakish's wife, who's Rabbi Yochanan's sister, shows up to Rabbi Yochanan essentially begging him to help somehow heal Reish Lakish. So she cries, Amarle, Aseh b'shvil b'ni, banai. So she says, we have children. Don't let my children be without a father. Amarla, he said to her, Azva yisomech ani achya. So he says, don't worry about orphans. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says he'll take care of the orphans. Aseh b'shvil amanusi. So again, Rabbi Yochanan's sister, Reish Lakish's wife, says, do it, daven for him, that I shouldn't become a widow. Amarla va'amunosayich alai tivtechu. Don't worry. The amonos kerolayin HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I will say, so the exchange is very interesting, right? So again, Rabbi Yochanan's sister is coming along and saying, daven for my husband, that he shouldn't die, that my children won't be orphans, that I shouldn't be a widow. So again, and Rabbi Yochanan's response is, don't worry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of the widow, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of the orphans. So I will say, this isn't Rabbi Yochanan being cold and indifferent. This is Rabbi Yochanan recognizing that there was a gzeira that he could not reverse. He already understood that Reish Lakish was going to die and understood that he could not reverse this. What Reish Lakish had done in a public setting of questioning the importance or the effectiveness or the meaning of his life change, apparently was severe to the point that Rabbi Yochanan could not change the gzeira. So what he just tries to do is tries to give some level of nechama to his sister, saying, don't worry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks after those who are most vulnerable, and the Ribbon Shalom will be there for you and for your children. Nach Shed Reb Shimon Lakish. Rish Lakish dies. Shlakish dies. And Rabbi Yochanan was very pained over the loss of his prized pupil. He was pained. So the Gemara says, who should go make Rabbi Yochanan feel better? Let Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas go, because Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas is very sharp, his teachings are very sharp, and he'll make Rabbi Yochanan feel better, a little bit better, with a proper Torah exchange. Azal Yosef Kamei. So sure enough, again, Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas goes to Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says, Kol milsa dahava am Rabbi Yochanan, amar lei teinach de Messiah lecha. Also the Gemara says, so every single thing that Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas said, Rabbi, yes, there's a brisa that supports you. A brisa that supports you. Amar, so Rabbi Yochanan says to him, Amar at ke bar lekisha, are you coming to try to be like Rish Lakish? Bar lekisha, Rish Lakish, ki hava amina milsa, hava makshili esrin va'arba kushiyaisa, o mifarik nalei arba esrin va'arba peruke. Every single time I would say something, Rabbi Yochanan said, Rish Lakish would ask 24 questions on every single thing that I said. And I would answer him with 24 answers. Umamela Ravcha Shmaita. And as a result of our exchange, him asking 24 questions, me giving 24 answers, so we would develop a sugya together. Vi'at amrit tanat misayelecha. And what are you doing? What are you doing, Elazar ben Pedas? You're bringing a brisa that supports me. Atulo yadana deshaper ka'amina. You think I need you to tell me that what I'm saying is correct? I know that what I'm saying is correct. I don't need you to support me. I need you to challenge me. So I will say, by the way, it's actually fascinating that what it's saying over here is really something interesting. I will say, one of the greatest ways to learn is to have your ideas challenged. To have your ideas challenged. I will say, so because again, when someone challenges your truths, that forces you to go ahead and hone them. Right? That forces you. I will say, one of the most interesting challenges that we have in contemporary society is you're not allowed to challenge other people's beliefs, right? If someone says something, right, they say something, so my obligation is to accept it. Instead of saying, well, no, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. That just because, and also you could fill in the blank, that no, just because you think something or you identify something doesn't mean that it's true. But it's interesting that in contemporary society, we stifle dissent, right? You're not allowed to disagree. And when you're not allowed to disagree, so then I will say that leads to just a total stagnation of idea or even of intellectual development. So it's incredible, I will say, that one of the best things you can have is someone who challenges you and challenges your ideas, because then you're forced to think it through. So here, Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Elazar does, thank you. I don't need you to support my ideas. I want them challenged. So the idea, the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Hava ka'azal v'karamane v'kabachi. So I will say, so literally again, Rabbi Yochanan was inconsolable over the loss of his Talmud. He was totally inconsolable. V'amar heicha at bar lekisha, heicha at bar lekisha. Where are you, Reish Lakish? Where are you? So I will say, it's so tragic. Hava katzavich ad shav daite. Literally, Rabbi Yochanan lost his mind. He lost his mind. Ba'o rabbanan rachame alei v'nach nafshe. The rabbis davened for him that he should die. I will say, I'll just point out over here, there's some fascinating halachic literature about this Gemara. And I will say, in general, one of the things that's incredibly difficult in life is when you see someone suffering, are you allowed to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they should be put out of their suffering? Right? Whether you see someone suffering with a physical ailment, you see someone suffering with a mental ailment, is it ever appropriate to say, Ribono Shel Olam, this person is suffering, I'm not davening for refuah Shleima. So I'm davening for Shalom. And sometimes Shalom Abosai is taking life from a person. So there's a lot of interesting halachic response about that. So just pointing out over here how fascinating it is over here that the Rabbanim davened for Rabbi Yochanan to die. They davened for him to die. They recognized that he was in such a state of existential pain and such a state of mental decline. He had literally lost his mind. Mental decline that they davened for him. They davened for him to die. So okay, so I will say that's the end of the story. That's the end of that story. Again, I will say. So now the Gemara goes back to the original story. What was the original story? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Right, we'll say, so again, remember the Rabbi Kik's Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. So we'll say, first of all, this is Rabbi Yochanan Ish Lakish. So much to say over here, but again, not enough time. So the Gemara goes back to it. We'll say, so now remember again, how do we get started on all this? Was the Maisa of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. What Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon? So we'll say, so that's the case where again, the guy says, you are vinegar, the son of wine. Right? So we'll say, and what happened? And Rabbi Elazar had him imprisoned. Right? Ultimately, he was executed. Rabbi Elazar felt terrible. Turned out the guy was Mamish Rasha. So again, remember, so Rabbi Elazar does the whole liposuction test to see liposuction test. In other words, did I do the right thing? Did I not do the right thing? So the Gemara says, "Vafilu hachi." And even with all of this, right? Even with all of this, even with the liposuction test, where it was clear that Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon did the right thing, so the Gemara says, "Lo samach Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon adaite kabil alei yisuri." So let's say, still, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon felt terrible about what happened to this guy. Like the fact that he was right. I will say, the fact that he was right at the end of the day, what kind of led to these circumstances was what? Was the fact that the guy called him a name. Called him that you are vinegar, the son of wine. He didn't feel right that everything escalated because he responded to a verbal provocation. So what did he do? Kabil ala yisure. He accepted physical suffering upon himself as a form of atonement for what he perceived as a sin. I just want to be clear. He didn't commit an Aveira. He didn't do anything wrong, but he felt that the way he acted was beneath him. So he accepted suffering. I will say, what was his suffering? In the evening, they would place beneath him 60 layers of felt, like bedding, 60 layers of felt. The tzafra nagdi mitusei shisi mishkali dama v'kiva. So we'll say, so ultimately again, and in the morning, they would remove 60 bowls filled with blood and pus. So apparently he was ill with sores, and the sores would emit all of this blood. And obviously, whenever you're dealing with such exact numbers, the Marshal brings down, it's not meant to be exact. The point is, it's a lot. It's a lot. He was really ill. L'machar avdi le devis. We'll say first white line, shisi mani lipta va'achilu bari. His wife would prepare for him 60 different dishes made with dates. Apparently, dates have a curative power. So she made for him 60 different dishes with dates, and he felt better. So the Gemara says, so I'll say, this is incredible. His wife would not let him go to the Beis Medrash, so that the other Rabbanim shouldn't bother him. Rabbi said, because remember again, people did not like Rabbi Elazar. Why didn't they like Rabbi Elazar? Because he became an enforcement arm for the king, right? He was sending people to jail. The Rabbanim gave him a hard time. Why are you removing the thorns from the vineyard? Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu remove his own thorns. That's not your job. So his wife would not let him go to the Beis Medrash so that he shouldn't be bothered by the other Rabbanim. Ba'arta amar lahu. In the evening he would say, Achai v'reai bo. So we'll say in the evening he would say, my brothers, right? My brothers, my companions, come. That was a reference to his suffering. At night, he would invite the suffering upon him as a form of atonement. In the morning, he would say to the suffering, leave me because I want to be able to learn. So he would accept the suffering upon himself at night, but during the day, he would ask the suffering to leave him so that he shouldn't be distracted from his study of Torah. So he was incredible. So Yom Echad Shama Devisu. One day, his wife heard him say this, and she heard him say, Achai v'reai, right? My brothers, my companions, come to me, a reference to the suffering. She said, so the Gemara says, Yom Amrlei at kamaisis iluyach. So she went nuts. She said, I don't understand. You're inviting this suffering onto you? Like, she thought the suffering was just coming upon him. Now she hears him actually inviting the suffering upon himself. She says, Kalis mamon shel beisaba. So apparently, again, she came from a wealthy family, and her family was supporting them. She said, you are using up all the money of my father's home. All of the money with all of the bedding we're ruining every single night. All the cooked dishes I have to prepare for you every single night. She said, you're inviting all of this upon yourself. So what happened? Imrida azul beinasha. She left the house and she went back to her father's house. We'll stop here for today. Good. Right, leaving you on the cliffhanger. I'll say, incredible Gemara to be continued. I'll say, dramatic. By the way, we have a couple of days of this. Incredible. 4:30 tomorrow morning. 4:30. Let's say shkoyach, everyone. We will continue the journey tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom. Have a great day, everyone.